Hi everyone. I know I'm the last talk of the day, but hopefully you're not feeling too sleepy and you can maintain your attention on it. So yes, I'm Sarah Beatham and I'm from the Animal and Plant Health Agency. And I'm going to talk about delivering oral contraceptives, and as you can see, my main focus of research is the grey squirrel in the UK. So as Kay spoke about, the grey squirrel has a number of negative impacts in the UK. So one of the main impacts is it's caused the major decline of the native red squirrel, Squirrels vulgaris. And this is through direct competition, but also through the transmission of diseases such as the pox virus, which is asymptomatic in the grey and lethal to the reds. And so as you can see, the UK has slowly, over time, turned from red to grey, with now over 2.5 million greys versus less than a few 100,000 reds. The other major impact is that they cause damage to trees through bark stripping, and this has had major economic and environmental impacts on our forestry industry. So at APHA, we're currently developing and testing oral contraceptives for grey squirrels. And we believe that this will potentially offer a more practical and publicly acceptable management tool when compared to traditional methods such as culling. So we've trialled various formulations of different contraceptives, and we've managed to produce infertility in lab rats. And this is from oral dosing and also from a free-feeding immunocontraceptive bait. So more recently, we've trialled this contraceptive in our captive grey squirrels. So we have a captive breeding colony based near York. And we've managed to achieve an immune response in some of those squirrels. But we need further research to develop the contraceptive to both improve the strength of the body response and also the consistency of the response amongst different individuals. So one of the key parts of the research is to develop a suitable bait delivery method. So this is centered around three main questions. So the first question is, how much contraceptive bait would an animal eat? So this will give us information on the potential dose rates that we could achieve in individuals. The second is, what proportion of a population would eat a contraceptive bait? So this will give us a measure of effectiveness. And finally, can we prevent other non-target animals from eating a contraceptive bait? So the contraceptives we're looking at are only mammal-specific, so we have to ensure that we're not going to have an impact on other animals. So we've developed a bait delivery system that's specifically for grey squirrels, but could be adaptable to other small mammals. So we've heard about a number of overabundant small mammals, rodents across Europe. And also we have other invasive squirrel family members across Europe, such as the Siberian chipmunk, the Finlayson squirrel, and also the Palser squirrel. So first, to answer the first question, how much contraceptive bait would an animal eat? So for this, we need individual level information. So we microchipped 202 squirrels in 6 woodlands. And then across each woodland, we deployed adapted bait hoppers. So all these woodlands are in Yorkshire, and we deployed bait hoppers in two woods in winter, 2 in summer, and 2 in spring. To simulate the delivery of a contraceptive, we had a 1-week pre-bait period where the bait doors of the hoppers were propped open, and they were baited with hazelnut paste, and then the doors were closed and they were monitored for 4 days. So this squirrel should demonstrate how one of our hoppers work. So basically, the hoppers record the date and time of each visit by a microchipped squirrel. So it has a microchip reader on the front. It has a weighted door to minimise non-target access, so the squirrels have to push open the door to access the bait. In the spring and summer woods, we added a weighing platform to measure the weight of bait taken by each squirrel. And as you can see, they're put on wooden stands, and the bait is put inside a metal box to minimise non-target access. So for the 4-day monitoring periods in each wood, we had in total 125 microchip squirrels, making 1,676 visits to hoppers, and in total 111 hoppers were visited. So we had quite a significant data set to look at. So this graph just shows the amount of bait taken per visit by individual squirrels versus the amount of time that they spent in hoppers. So in spring and summer, on average, we had 47 grams of bait taken by females and 39 grams by males. And as you can see, the duration of hopper visit was significantly related to bait uptake, with on average about 1 gram of bait taken per minute visit. So using this information, we could then compare bait uptake across different seasons, because in winter we didn't have the weighing system as part of the hoppers. So this graph just shows the amount of time spent in hoppers by males and females in each season. So females on average made 12 visits to 3 hoppers, and males 15 visits to 5 hoppers. So this told us that individual squirrels are likely to receive multiple doses of a contraceptive within 4 days, but also that males weren't overly dominating the hoppers and monopolizing them compared with females. In fact, an average visit by an individual was just 3 minutes, so individuals weren't spending a long time at the hoppers and monopolizing them. And as you can see from the data, we had better uptake in winter and spring, which coincides with the peak breeding in grey squirrels. So this is a good time of year in which to deploy a contraceptive. So feeding all that microchip data into a model, we looked at the probability that male and female squirrels would enter a hopper in different seasons. So as you can see, squirrels were more likely to enter hoppers in winter, but females specifically were more likely to enter them in spring. So as our target individual will be the breeding female, this could be the best, most cost-effective time to deliver a contraceptive. But as you can see, the probability drops off significantly as you have increasing numbers of squirrels per hopper in a wood. So for the best results, we have to aim for at least 1 hopper per 2 squirrels in a population. And in order to do that, we have to estimate the initial squirrel density in a wood. And we've developed a method using camera traps. So you put the camera traps out for 5 days in a wood, get an initial density, and then you know how many hoppers you need to put out to ensure an effective delivery. So second question, what proportion of a population would eat a contraceptive bait? So to answer this question, we deployed our bait hoppers, again across 14 different woodlands in England and Wales. And again, we pre-baited them for 1 week, and then for 4 days, or at least 4 days, we added a bait dye, rhodamine B. And when the squirrels ingest the dye, their hair turns fluorescent under UV light. So we get pink squirrels. And so when we then go at the end of the trial and we capture and hair sample as many squirrels as possible, we can then look at the proportion of the population that has taken the bait. So this graph just summarizes the results, so the percentage of grey squirrels in each wood that tested positive for the dye, so took bait from the feeders. So you can see the light blue is low squirrel densities up to dark blue, the higher densities that we recorded. So the best results we had, unsurprisingly, were with the higher hopper density of 3 per hectare in summer, with low to average squirrel densities. We also trialled longer deployment of contraceptives, so 12 days versus 4, but we didn't get a massive increase in bait uptake in the population. Again, we trialled a longer deployment of 8 days, looking at different hopper densities, but basically the most important factors were the hopper density versus the squirrel density in each wood. And overall, we found that most squirrels in most woods would actually eat a contraceptive bait from a hopper. So the third and final question, can we prevent non-target animals from eating a contraceptive bait? So as you can see in all of our trials, we monitored our hoppers with cameras and recorded all the animals that were around or inside the hoppers. So the hoppers recorded when the door was opened, so the bait door was opened. So out of 322 hoppers monitored in 14 woods over the 4 days, we monitored them with remote cameras and we obtained around 180,000 photos and videos of animals in and around hoppers. And out of those, we could relate 5,000 visits by squirrels and only 4 visits by mice. So this is wood mice. So from this research, we could conclude that in most areas in the UK, a contraceptive bait could be delivered to many grey squirrels with minimal impact on other wildlife. So this is using the basic weighted door hopper. But what about red squirrels? So obviously this is more of a challenging question, and we had to think of a more sophisticated solution. So we decided that body weight could be the most simple but cost-effective solution to address this issue. So to prove this, we used automated weighers attached to feeders to collect as much body weight data from red squirrels around the UK. So the weighers were put out for 1 to 2 weeks and then monitored with cameras. And this table just summarises the maximum red squirrel weights we achieved from the hoppers. So as you can see, they were fairly consistent across areas, with a maximum of 427 grams in winter and 438 grams in summer. So we decided to have a threshold of 450 grams to make sure that all red squirrels would be excluded from feeders. And using body weight data collected in our own trials, we found that between 93 and 96% of grey squirrels were at least 450 grams. And then I went to other practitioners across the UK and collected as many grey squirrel body weights as possible. And I found that between 76 and 88% of grey squirrels were at least 450 grams. So from this research, we concluded that a weight threshold of 450 grams would exclude all red squirrels while allowing at least 90% of adult grey squirrels access and at least 76% of juvenile and adult greys access to a contraceptive bait. So then we used this data to produce a prototype feeder based on body weight. So it has a motion sensor, and when it detects movement on the weighing platform, it weighs whatever's there. If it's above 450 grams, then it opens an electronic door to the bait. So we just tried this in a small pilot trial in a woodland in Cumbria. So we had over a couple of weeks, we had grey squirrels attempting to eat the bait 13 times, and they were successful 7 times. Whilst red squirrels attempted to eat the bait twice from the feeders, and as you can see, they couldn't get in, even though they really tried. So, although this is a fairly small trial and was done on a small scale, what we want to do now is take this design to manufacturers and produce maybe a more robust design of feeder, and then test it on a much bigger scale. So the red light hasn't gone off yet. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much.
So Sarah, that's a brilliant presentation, obviously, really amazing work. I am curious, you took 180,000 photos that captured 5,000 squirrels and 4 mice. What were the other photos and videos of? I'm just curious. Because it only activates when the door is open. So I was actually surprised to hear that there was 5,000 of those animals captured on video. I'm just...
No, sorry, so the remote cameras were basically constantly active throughout the deployment of the hoppers. So they recorded anything in, like deer wandering around, badgers.
Okay, understood.
And then so painstakingly we had to go through the date and times of when the door opened and matched it to the date and time on the camera.
My apologies. I misunderstood from the slide. I thought
it
was only triggered when the trap was open, but it was just continuous.
It's just continuous, yeah.
Thank you.
And we have one more question.
Thanks, Sarah. Great talk. So, in the last example that you showed with the weight mechanism that's built into it, how long do you have to train or leave it out for the squirrels to understand that there is bait behind the screen at the end before you're actually able to activate the device?
So I believe the first squirrels kind of came in contact with the feeder about 6 hours after the deployment. So it was put in an area where a volunteer was controlling greys. So there was a lot of reds in the area. They were putting out traps to control the greys when they detected them. So there was feeders around, so they were familiar with that area, so they went straight to the trap. It took a while for them to realise how to get into it, because it's not like a traditional squirrel feeder. I think it was within the first 24 hours the first grey actually went in, and that's what we found with the other feeders we deploy, because the greys tend to work them out quite quickly.
Excellent presentation. That was really very interesting. I wanted to ask you, is this being used at all? Is it being applied now anywhere for management?
What, the contraceptive?
Yeah, you know, your whole system there with the bait.
So the contraceptive itself, as I mentioned, it's still being developed at our labs in York, because it still needs further refinements in terms of the response, the body response, the strength of the response and consistency, before it can actually be trialled in the field. However, some of the information, so the research we've been doing on body weight, I've just developed a selective cage trap for grey squirrels to be used in red squirrel areas. So we're hoping that the research will still help with grey squirrel management anyway, yeah.
All right, we have another question.
Yeah, so with your weight, you've got your minimum weight that it must be. But what about in areas where you've got pine marten, who are then heavier than the greys? Is there a maximum weight you can set?
Yeah, so yeah, we always get a question about pine martens. So I guess that at the moment, in the vast majority of areas that you would deploy a contraceptive for grey squirrels in the UK, you wouldn't have pine martens. If you did have pine martens in the area, then we would look into putting a maximum threshold. It makes things a little bit more complicated, because then you have issues with maybe younger pine martens and pine martens going half onto the weighing platform. But actually, through the actual physical design of the feeder, you could deter pine martens from accessing it. So I have put hoppers out in areas where there's pine martens, and they tend to take a lot longer to access them than the greys. And because our contraceptive was shown we can feed it to a lot of greys within 4 days, we shouldn't have to deploy our hoppers for too long before we've accessed the most of the population of greys. So.